Life, Growth, and Responsibility by George Gill. Every life needs a direction, or it just kind of wobbles around like a shopping cart with a busted wheel. Core orientation is about picking something deeply valuable to aim at, something bigger than, I want more snacks, or I hope people think I'm impressive. It's choosing a target that actually deserves your effort. Alongside that, there's the moral piece, treating people the way you'd want to be treated, even when you're tired, annoyed, or convinced you're the main character. Add to that a stubborn kind of faith and gratitude, not because life is easy, but because focusing only on what's awful makes you useless. Then you throw in a commitment to telling the truth, or at least not lying more than absolutely necessary, and you've got a basic internal compass. It won't make life painless, but it will keep you from drifting into complete chaos. Suffering, bitterness, and darkness. Life can be brutal enough that hiding or checking out from it starts to look like a reasonable strategy. If you don't process your pain properly, it mutates into bitterness. That bitterness doesn't just sit quietly. It grows, like emotional mold, especially if you refuse responsibility for your own potential. You start to resent people who are doing better, not because they're evil, but because they remind you of what you're not doing. Adventure versus control. Most people would secretly love to hold a universal remote for life. Pause, rewind, mute other people, skip uncomfortable content. The problem is, the more you try to control every detail, the less alive things feel. Adventure requires uncertainty. If you already know every outcome, it's not a story, it's a script. Letting go of total control, just a bit, opens the door to experiences you couldn't have planned, which is both the good news and the bad news. Trying to micromanage everything kills spontaneity and growth. You stay safe, but also stagnant. Courage is what bridges that gap, choosing uncertainty over padded, boring security. Wisdom isn't about ignoring chaos. It's about standing in the middle of it and acting decently anyway. Fear, avoidance, and exposure. Fear is rarely random. It tends to point directly at something you need to deal with, a skill you need to build, a truth you need to face, a conversation you need to have. Avoidance feels like relief in the moment, but over time it keeps you weak and stuck, like a video game character who never leaves the tutorial zone. Voluntary exposure. Deliberately doing the small, scary thing you've been dodging builds confidence. The first time you do it, you might shake. The 20th time, you might shrug. Repeated exposure ratchets up your strength in that area to levels you didn't think were possible. Eventually, things that used to terrify you become mildly annoying at worst, which is a pretty big upgrade. Gap between you and your ideal. Your ideal self is the version of you that has their life together, eats vegetables, answers messages on time, and somehow never loses their keys. That ideal is meant to give you direction, not to be a club you beat yourself with. If the gap between who you are now and who you want to be is too big, it can freeze you. You don't feel motivated. You feel doomed. That's when your ideal stops being helpful and starts becoming an emotionally weaponized fantasy. The goal isn't to throw away the ideal, but to shrink the steps between here and there. Think of the ideal as a landmark on a distant mountain, not a demand that you teleport. Scaling down the dragon. A huge, unmanageable goal is like a dragon the size of a skyscraper. Impressive, but not something you're going to fight this afternoon. If you stare at it too long, you'll just end up lying on the ground, sighing dramatically. The trick is to scale the dragon down. Massive problems need to be chopped into small, extremely unglamorous tasks. Instead of fix my life, you might start with clear one table or reply to one email. The task should be so doable that it feels almost rude not to do it. Every time you complete one of these micro tasks, you build a little bit of confidence, like adding one plate at a time to your mental barbell. Humility and starting where you are. Humility here doesn't mean telling yourself you're worthless. It means telling yourself the truth about where you actually are. Maybe your finances are wrecked, your room is a disaster, and your habits have taken early retirement. Accepting that reality can feel humiliating. First steps from that place often seem embarrassingly small or trivial, like take out the trash or brush my teeth tonight. But uphill is still uphill, even from the bottom of the valley. Honest acceptance of your position is the starting line for all real growth. You can't climb out of a hole you refuse to admit you're in. Ignorance, questions, and learning. Most people would rather fake understanding than raise their hand and admit they're lost. The problem is, pretending to know something politely locks your ignorance in place. Stupid questions, asked sincerely, shine a light on the exact gaps in your knowledge so they can be filled. Listening deeply to the answers, rather than just waiting for your turn to talk, gradually rearranges your brain. If you ask 1,000 sincere questions over time, you'll lose 1,000 pockets of ignorance, and that adds up. Knowledge isn't dropped on you all at once. It's built one honest confession of, I don't know at a time. Decisions, indecision, and stress. Unmade decisions are like mental junk files clogging your internal hard drive. You can ignore them for a while, but they still slow everything down. Avoiding a decision feels like you're keeping your options open, but really you're just choosing stagnation. Every postponed choice quietly adds to your anxiety, guilt, and sense of being behind. Indecision compounds stress the way unpaid bills compound interest. Making a clear choice, even an imperfect one, releases pressure and restores momentum. You stop being a spectator in your own life and start being at least a junior co-pilot. Comparison and self-measurement. Comparing yourself to other people is a rigged game. You don't see their full story. You see their curated highlight reel and your own behind-the-scenes bloopers. That's not exactly fair scoring. A healthier approach is to compare yourself to earlier versions of you. Are your habits slightly better? Are your reactions slightly less chaotic? Are you making fewer terrible decisions before breakfast? Tracking improvement in specific areas, like patience, honesty, consistency, gives you something concrete to measure. Aim for somewhat better instead of perfect, because perfection is a moving target and a lousy coach. Momentum, upward and downward. Life has its own kind of physics. Small positive actions, taking a walk, cleaning a corner, finishing a task, start to build upward momentum. Small negative actions, doom scrolling, avoiding everything, letting chaos pile up, build downward momentum. Left unchecked, either direction can become exponential. Growth and challenge. Child analogy. Think about how you'd help a child grow. You wouldn't give them impossible tasks and then mock them for failing, nor would you do everything for them and call that love. You'd offer challenges that stretch them just enough, with a decent chance of success. You'd love who they are now and who they could become. Real confidence for that child comes from competence, actually doing things they couldn't do before, not from constant praise. The same applies to you. Every time you see yourself exceed a previous limit, you meet more of your true self, the part of you that isn't defined by your current fears and habits. Chaos, apocalypse, and attitude. The future always contains the possibility of things falling apart. Jobs vanish, relationships end, bodies fail, societies wobble. Pretending everything will always be fine is naive. Obsessing over everything that might collapse is paralyzing. Naivete ignores danger. Cynicism fixates on it and spreads despair like a hobby. Wisdom sits in the middle. It sees the risk clearly but chooses courageous realism. You acknowledge that bad things can happen and still decide to act nobly, to be honest, kind, responsible. Anyway, the apocalypse may or may not arrive, but your attitude toward it is already shaping who you are. Practical micro rule: start small. When life feels overwhelming, the grand self-help plans become comedy. You don't need a 10-year strategy. You need one tiny rule. Make the next task small enough that you'll actually do it. Begin with one drawer, one corner, one email, one call. If the task doesn't make you think, okay, fine, I can at least do that, it's still too big. Repeat these small actions daily. Over time, they rebuild your sense of reliability and self-trust. When your life has completely fallen apart, micro tasks are the scaffolding that lets you slowly reconstruct something that doesn't collapse when you breathe on it. Built for maximal challenge. Despite what a lot of advertising implies, humans aren't built for a permanent vacation of snacks, screens, and zero responsibility. That recipe produces boredom, anxiety, and a lingering sense that you're wasting something important. Deep satisfaction tends to show up when you meet and overcome significant challenges. Raising a family, building something, learning deeply, carrying responsibilities that actually matter. Life's meaning doesn't pop out of nowhere. It emerges when you voluntarily pick up heavy but worthwhile burdens. Maximal challenge isn't about suffering for fun. It's about discovering how much strength, courage, and depth you're capable of. A simple daily application path. Translating all this into daily life doesn't require a 12-step manifesto. You can keep it simple. In the morning, briefly compare yourself to yesterday and choose one small area to improve. Something concrete like, I'll be honest in this one conversation, or I'll leave my room slightly better than I found it. During the day, face one thing you've been avoiding. A call, a task, a tiny risk. Add one action that increases order in your environment. At night, look back honestly. Where did you avoid? Where did you act? And what's one tiny step you're willing to take tomorrow? It's not flashy, but over time it turns your life into a slow, steady climb instead of a slow, confused slide.